may find itself suddenly at the bottom of the pile through no fault of its own, simply because the issue has been taken out of its control. Another impact, you would say, is, for instance, once you have a fixed price regime, various components of the price are all determined by fiat. In this case, that is set by what we know as NMDPRA, what used to be DPR and PPRA in the past. So what that means is that for transportation, there's a certain amount that is allowed for it. For storage and handling, there's a certain amount allowed for it, and so on and so forth in the entire value chain. So rather than a situation as envisaged by the PIA, in which market forces and your efficiency and operational ability would determine what comes to you as an operator, you now find yourself in a situation where it is the agency that determines what you are to get. Now, why is this a challenge? It's a challenge because we find ourselves in a situation where, because of the prevailing global macroeconomic forces, things like the war between Russia and Ukraine, higher crude oil prices, higher prices for diesel, and so on and so forth, the operating costs of operators locally has gone up. So anybody who makes use of diesel, whether that is you in your house, whether it is me in running a petrol station, whether it's a transporter in transporting petrol with his truck, whether it's a vessel owner who makes use of diesel, all of us have found our costs going up significantly. Unfortunately, if we had been in a deregulated market where market forces determine the price, you would find that the price of petrol, for instance, would definitely not be at the level it is, because all operators in that space would have had to adjust their prices to reflect the additional cost of diesel. But today, only one player in that whole value chain have been privileged to get an increase in how much they get. So it looks as if all other players have been left to their fate, and that is one of the downsides of not fully implementing the PIA. Many operators who are in the industry are finding it difficult to survive. All these I would put in the plate of what I might describe as things are now being done on an arbitrary basis rather than being determined by market forces. So in summary, what I would say is, yes, the PIA has envisaged and passed, not a perfect document, but definitely was supposed to introduce a lot of global best practices into the industry. Unfortunately, a key element of it has been suspended, and because of that uncertainty, the very key objective of PIA, which was to attract investment and give confidence to investors in the downstream space, has now found itself in a situation where there's a lot of confusion and a lack of clarity. So I'll stop here for now and take it on from there.
Brilliant. Thank you very much for that insightful introduction into the pros and cons so far with the PIA. You've talked about the fixed price regime, the impact of the deregulated markets, and of course the NNPC being the singular determining determinant for market share. I'd like to sort of start off by posing the same question to Mr. Olasupo Agbaje. I'm hoping that we can hear him now. So, Mr. Agbaje, if we can hear you now, excellent. How would you describe the impact of the PIA reforms on the downstream oil and gas sector? Again, would like to share your insights on some of the positive transformation in your views and where there are areas for improvement.
My name is Agbaje, General Manager, Economic Regulation and Strategic Planning, NGRA. I am here today representing the Authority Chief Executive, Engineer Farouk Ahmed, who is unavoidably absent this morning. He would have loved to be here with us, as we all know. He's very excited about issues relating to investments and promotion of stability in the downstream sector. Unfortunately, there are previously scheduled assignments that makes it impossible for him to be here this morning. But I'm sure he is here with us in every other way and will be very well represented. And so for NMDPRA, we bring warm regards to the Nigeria-British Chamber of Commerce. We identify the NBCC as a default partner in our drive to ensure that we enable business in the midstream and the downstream sector. So basically, at NMDPRA, we want to pride ourselves as business enablers and not just regulators and enforcers. We're in the era where we believe that businesses must be promoted. It's important that we attract investments into the downstream, into the midstream, and indeed every sector of the industry. And so that informs our perception of the PIA, which basically is the document put in place to ensure that Nigeria is able to maximize its hydrocarbon potentials. So without taking further time, let me quickly run to a brief presentation that we have prepared for this session, and having brought our greetings and regards to the executives of the British Chamber of Commerce, the captains of industry, and our here present gentlemen of the press, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the CEO, I welcome every one of us to this event, and we'll also want to congratulate the Energy Group for having this theme, the downstream oil and gas industry, navigating the post-PIA reality, which is relevant and critical in supporting the successful implementation of the Petroleum Industry Act, which for us has clearly created for Nigeria and all our investment partners, of course, which the British Commerce Act, outstanding opportunities, specifically in the downstream. We're talking about the downstreams. So basically, quickly, our contributions at this forum will cover 3 key areas in downstream operations concerning the PIA, which are: 1, overview of the impact of a vibrant downstream sector, review of key downstream sector enablers as provided in the PIA, and an overview of measures implemented by the regulator in navigating the post-PIA realities. So when we talk about the impact of a vibrant downstream sector, we believe that the sector is critical, is a critical component in the extensive hydrocarbon value chain that delivers the value derivable from the rich hydrocarbon resources and the world that we live. The sector delivers all the energy that is obtainable from hydrocarbon that is used for supplying electricity and for so many other purposes that we are all aware of course, that supports our general well-being. As we all know, downstream is associated with development. And of course, natural gas and its allied products, various refinery petroleum products, an extensive product slates of the petrochemical process and industry are all obtained from the downstream sector of the oil and gas industry. Economic activities here run across hydrocarbon processing, transportation of oil and gas, port storage, wholesale and retail of various rates, key feedstocks, all of these are byproducts, including fertilizers, chemicals, solvents, and petrochemicals. So it's actually a very broad area that we're talking about. So ladies and gentlemen, a vibrant downstream sector is clearly required to support economic development, not just in Nigeria, globally, as well as guarantee the general well-being of the population. The absence or suboptimal performance of the downstream sector contains great challenges in terms of energy supply and availability of critical economic inputs for agricultural and industrial sectors. The global downstream sector shall continue to contribute to the global economy, notwithstanding the prevailing trends on carbon neutral or energy transition, and is projected to see fresh investments in the excess of $170 billion for 2022 and even higher figures beyond. So the value optimization of any hydrocarbon resource base is typically achieved only through the emplacement of an effective downstream sector that optimally utilizes the inherent sectoral opportunities in segments. Now, that is created by the PIA for the downstream sector. Things that provides a clear regulatory and fiscal framework that we all agreed upon. It promotes transparency, good governance, accountability in the administration of petroleum resources, foster the business environment conducive for petroleum operations, and it clearly establishes technical, operational, and commercial regulatory frameworks for downstream gas and liquid sectors of the industry. And that's why we have two regulators in the sector today. The PIA aims to promote competitive markets, a very crucial objective of the PIA to entrench competition, promote, establish, and develop a positive environment for international and domestic investments in the framework. And probably that's very important to be here this morning. Developing market-based strategies and apply that we can have that is like all sectors across all products and promoting access regime in the downstream sector, basically centering around infrastructure development. Of course, HSC is very key on all of this. The NMPBI is committed to ensuring
Okay.
and are engaging actively with industry.
It looks like we're struggling with the connectivity. Mr. Olashupo Agbaje, can you hear us? Perhaps whilst we're trying to get you back on track, I'm just going to move very quickly to Mr. Ed Ubong, the Managing Director of Shell. Mr. Ubong, I hope you can hear me. And we will perhaps take your goodwill message now whilst we move on into the next questions. Mr. Ubong? Right, okay. Well, we'll continue. We'll continue. I'm sure they will join us. These things are inevitable. Oh, there we go. Looks like Mr. Ubong is coming through. Right. I will.
Okay, so and then talk I hope you can hear me.
Yes, we can hear you, Mr. Ubong. Fantastic.
Understand that in all of these points are key. So the NMPBI is we are required to put in regulations and will ensure that the industry operates in the most efficient manner. So all of these are also being put in place by the authority and also being based on long-term impact of the implementation of the PIA that's being administered by the NMPBI and other key players in the industry will create a downstream sector that is robustly competitive, transparent, attractive for investors, and supporting sustained development in Nigeria. And so having said that, we understand that the PIA, of course, we all understand that it's work in progress. There's no law that's perfect, and there are realities arising from the PIA. So navigating the post-PIA realities of the domestic oil and gas market, this I mean, we understand the implementation of the PIA in the downstream sector will introduce changes across the regulatory and commercial value chain sector, which must be adequately managed to their strategic advantages created by the Act. And NDPIA is employing a strategies and initiatives to promote a seamless implementation of the PIA in the downstream sector. One of these includes accelerated development of relevant regulations and public strategies required for effective operationalization of the PIA. And the first in the series of stakeholder engagements, regulation development hold from the 4th to the 7th of July, where we'll be engaging stakeholders actively on the regulations that have been drafted and taking their inputs to ensure that everybody is carried along in this process. Number 2 is optimal stakeholder inclusiveness in our implementation program. This is very key. As the Chief Executive on a regular and sustained basis engages with various key sectors, stakeholders, interest groups, and to DAPMA, to OPTS, and all of that. So that has been going on very actively to ensure that we carry everybody along. Number 3 is placing effective organizational and industry change management plans for accelerated migration of all downstream operations to the new PIA regulatory regimes. This is going on very actively also. Upgrading and adopting appropriate digital technology that supports optimal implementation of the provisions of the PIA. So we're innovation and automation conscious, and it is our objective to ensure that a lot of our operations continue to remain automated, and this will be taken to even higher levels in this dispensation. Also, it's important that we accelerate the human capital development drive as a regulator for appropriate enforcement of all provisions of the PIA, especially in areas of commercial, staffing, and finally on this subject, placing a strong corporate governance and organizational cultural orientation for the integrated agencies from the defunct organizations. You understand that the NNDPR is made up of 3 legacy institutions, so it's a coming together of 3 different organizations, and so integration is key for us, and culture we also intend to build. As I said earlier, the NNDPR is, we pride ourselves as a business enabler. And so to achieve this, a lot of corporate governance issues are being looked at and being put in place to ensure that we align this transition team that is working effectively around this. And so, as the Nigerian-British Chamber of Commerce reviews how to navigate for PIA realities in this event, the Chief Executive will want to affirm that the regulator, the NNDPRA, is ready and available to provide all the support and enablement required for full migration to the robust and conducive environment created by the PIA. And we also want to end by saying certain challenges that are being faced currently.
Okay, we're just going to hopefully wrap up that presentation. Sir, thank you very much. Thanks for giving us some insights into the plans and aspirations of from the regulator's perspective. I'm not going to summarize now because I think there are a few questions that will come through. I'm going to turn to Mr. Ubong now, and I hope this time we will be able to hear him. Are we able to hear Mr. Ubong? Can we see if we can project him? Right, okay. Let me turn to you, Mr. Oyebanji. So following the PIA, we've seen significant changes in the sector, locally and globally.
Hello, can you hear me?
Now we can. This is where we're going to be chasing our tails this morning, and technology is taking its toll on us. So, Mr. Ed Ubong, we can hear you now. Right. Can you just signal that you can hear us, Mr. Ubong? Okay, we're still struggling there. So I'll continue my question, Mr. Oyebanji, and I'll sort of repeat it again. So following PIA, we have seen significant changes in the sector. Mr. Olashupo just mentioned a few of the aspirations, in my view. Locally and globally, there have been changes. Indigenous oil and gas firms have grown, however. However, the impact...
Good morning. I don't think the studio can hear us while we can hear those who are online.
Right, okay.
Actually, good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes.
So, Mr. Ubong, maybe if you can speak.
Operator, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Somewhat ensuring an effective strategy nationwide that can allow and provide a platform for industry stakeholders to interact, network, and hopefully create a lot of value. I will speak specifically around the gas sector. I'm a gas man. In the room also, of course, you have my very able lady of gas, Audrey Esibo, who will also contribute to the gas narrative. But I think the start is that the increase in the global demand of gas and the emergence of gas as a partner to renewables in the energy transition has seen us moving away a lot from a dependence on oil exploration to find a way on how we can actually increase gas development and production. Here in Nigeria, maybe one of the key areas that we have seen post the PIA implementation is how we can increase the gas supply. So this is gas supply both for domestic consumption and also gas supply. The key bit, of course, which has been alluded to by the NNDPR chief executive, Farouk Ahmed, represented by Shupo Baje, has been the fact that we are now in a stage where we need to get some clarity around what the pricing and regulation would be in the industry. The NNDPR has been sticking very close to the timelines set in the PIA and they published a draft set of regulations. We just then need to work that space to see how we can get to the final position where we know clearly what pricing works. Our push from the Nigerian Gas Association is that we want a gas pricing mechanism that supports willing buyer and willing seller. And I think Shupo also alluded to that. So I think we are in many ways aligned on where we want the industry to be. And also I think our first speaker, speaking on behalf of Downstream, had also said the same thing. Let's move to a willing buyer, willing seller pricing framework. Let's move to a framework that is cost reflective, one that ensures that the investments that have been made by investors, that there is enough return for those investments, and then allows end products to move to where they are needed at the right price. In Nigeria today, gas remains the cheapest energy source for local manufacturing, and its constant availability is a key driver if we want to achieve goals to grow and stimulate the manufacturing sector. We all know its importance in the gas to power sector, where gas of course drives most of the thermal plants that we have in country. Of course, there is always the mismatch where over 85 million Nigerians don't have access to grid electricity. But it's about opportunity. It's where we are. It's a major problem, but it's a big opportunity for us then to work together to unlock the challenges in that gas to power value chain so that we can improve access to energy for all Nigerians. The road is long, that the road will be difficult, but I am confident that where we have such panels as has been set up here by the NBCC, with strong representation, for instance, by the industry regulator, the NMDPRA, that we will be having the right conversations, that we'll be looking at issues pragmatically, and together we'll be able to draft a way forward to help us unlock the huge gas potentials that Nigeria currently has. In concluding, again, I just want to say thank you for having me here. I look forward to listening because I think the panel is well positioned, the regulator, the industry players, both up to them, both in oil and in gas. And I'll continue to hang on and listen and hear and learn from the panel. Thank you very much.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Mr. Edubong. We finally got to hear your goodwill message, and very insightful. The road is long, it will be difficult, but with the right conversations and dialogue in a pragmatic way, collectively we will chart the course for a successful sector. On where we are post PIA, but I'll ask questions around gas so that you can take it all collectively. So my first question, following the government's launch of the decade of gas pre-PIA, in what ways has the PIA enabled implementation? And then secondly, with regards to gas pricing, as alluded by everyone who's spoken this morning and also sort of concurred with by Mr. Ubong, what are your views? Are we moving towards a willing buyer, a willing seller regime? Do you see gas flaring seas by 2030 as part of our net zero carbon emission environment? So there are about 3 questions all in there, but I hope you can sort of take them through as we go along. Thank you. Over to you, Mrs. Joe Ezigbo. Yes, we can. Excellent.
You need to repeat the first question because there was no audio when you were speaking.
Right. So my first question was following the government's launch of the decade of gas pre-PIA, in what ways has the PIA enabled implementation? That's the first question. And then the second one, with regards to gas pricing, as we had started the conversation, what are your views? Are we moving towards a willing buyer, willing seller regime? I hope you heard. Excellent.
Yes, thank you. A very good morning once again to everyone in the room. Let me also acknowledge everyone, not just as lead sponsor of the DHL, but also as my president in the Nigerian Gas Association and someone that I continue to work very close with in moving this industry forward. So I will do my best to address your questions without really, I don't want to repeat what everyone has said. So the decade of gas obviously has been a program set by the government to see how as a country we can truly leverage our gas resources, because recognition of the fact that Nigeria is very rich, but indeed, this narrative about not how much resource you have, but how well you have, and the need for us to build a more resilient domestic gas market, and of course still leveraging on export potentials. So the decade of gas initiatives also around making sure that we can increase the utilization of LPG, looking at the auto gas market, looking at the infrastructure play, upstream, midstream, and downstream, so that we're addressing gas both from the production supply point of view, all the way down to the end users. I think that when we want to look at the question of how well has the PIA enabled that, it is still very much early days. Very much early days to be able to do that kind of assessment. There was already a lot of work that had been happening pre the enactment of the PIA itself. And I see that the government has just continued on the trajectory of trying to roll out its plans and programs relating to the decade of gas, of course, in partnership with the private sector. But it would be good perhaps to touch on some of the things within the PIA that, in my view, are things that can continue to enable that continuity, pulling the investments that we're looking at. Yes, as I think Tunji pointed out, the fact that the suspension of elements of the PIA has not been a good signal, because we spent 20 years waiting for this piece of legislation, and the intention was to attract investors, to signal to them that you have clarity about the fiscal and commercial frameworks that will underpin your investment, so this is a good place to bring in your funds. But that said, we hope that as we go forward, we will see that continuity and consistency. So talking about some of the things within the PIA, that improved tax framework, for instance, around gas, is something that we know is going to attract investment, because this has been a continuous narrative, given the cost of funding of gas projects and that unique return profile, which is very different from that of oil. So the tax incentives that are within the PIA, we expect to see that as something that investors can leverage on to be able to pull in investments across upstream, midstream, downstream in the sector. The midstream infrastructure gas fund is also something that we expect will enable the decade of gas, okay? Because now we see a better ability for projects to be securitized, to de-risk that space from the capital intensity of gas projects, to help investors to access funding, because it addresses their ability to meet the equity portion of their funding and things like that. So that's a very good plus, and we expect that as the rollout begins to happen, we will see the positives in more tangible measure. The challenges that may come up around this that we have to be able to address and make sure that as a nation we are paying attention to is, one, we want to be sure that this fund actually is deployed in an efficient and a very timely manner, and making sure that it actually goes to the projects for which it is required. So we don't want this to be another situation where the funds are available, but those who really need it are not the ultimate beneficiaries. So that's something to keep in view. Of course, we expect that the flare-out program will then be able to move forward, in terms of accelerating how Nigeria can commercialize the volume, the flare gas volumes. But the challenge with this again, of course, is that we know that there is a bit of delay that the NGFCP program has experienced thus far, and the challenge of commerciality of the volumes that are currently available, and whether we'll be able to mine those in the way that they were originally projected. So that's something that still needs to be looked at, but the opportunity is now there, especially also because part of the PIA provision from a gas development point of view is that the upstream producers must provide in advance their commercialization plans before they can then secure approval of their field development plans. And this, again, is something that can help us from ab initio, from the beginning of the program project, to address what will happen with the gas volumes that come out of there. And of course, the open access conversation, which has been spoken to by one or two of the previous speakers, is something that we expect the PIA will facilitate advancement, because of course now we have the network code properly legislated, the open access requirements properly legislated, but again there's going to be a need for extensive collaboration in the operationalization, so that we can literally mine the value that comes from having an open access regime, even as we're looking for more people to come into that infrastructure space, especially when we're talking about pipelines and transportation and transmission processing facilities. If I will touch on a couple of other things, for instance, the issue of pricing. And this has been talked on. I think everybody, there's no way any player in the field does not talk about pricing. Because one of the biggest challenges we've had in the industry has been issues around regulated pricing, commerciality of supply, what it is that can incentivize the producers, given the many, many cost elements that are along the value chain from the point of wellhead all the way down to the end user. So pricing continues to be one of those things that must be addressed to enable this decade of gas. Now within the PIA, of course, we know that that pricing framework is that we don't have that very clear process to where we get to willing buyer, willing seller. And this is something that the market has been pushing for quite a while, because we know that we have a huge infrastructure deficit, and we need to be sure that we have bankable projects. If the economics don't make sense, we're not going to see the kind of investments that can help us to change the narrative around gas to power, for instance. Now, most of us in the room, I'm sure, we're not part of the almost 90 million Nigerians that don't have access to power. So we're actually a privileged few. However, even amongst ourselves, we've seen and experienced grid collapses over the last 5 months. The last one we saw grid power drop from 3,700 megawatts down to just 9 megawatts, and a lot of us felt the pinch, because power is a critical element in our national well-being, our ability to facilitate industry and entrepreneurial activity and contribute to our GDP. So in a situation where we don't have enough investors who are able to come into that space, whether it is power, whether it is gas for industry, we need to see the investors. So we have to be able to address pricing. And what it means is that there is still work to be done from the PIA implementation perspective, from the regulatory perspective. The engagement work that is going on with NMTPRA and the industry is really critical, not just for the engagement, but subsequently the implementation, to know that we can get a commercial framework that works and get more projects that are bankable, and this is what allows us to then be able to actualize a lot of the decade of gas initiatives. When we look at some of the plans around the decade of gas, the auto gas initiative, the LPG expansion initiatives, again, one of the big bottlenecks there is infrastructure. So we need to be able to pull in investments in that space. And there's a huge focus around LPG, which is very laudable. We're seeing many people come into that space. We're seeing a lot of partnerships between government and the private sector to address gaps within that value chain. But at the same time, there are still some challenges that need to be addressed from the regulatory point. Now, of course, the unbundling of NMDs is very, very important. It's a very valid the direction of growth. We've seen how this works in national oil companies, in other larger nations, and the efficiencies that this brings. Now, this is important for us as a nation, for our industry, because some of the challenges we used to face were, a lot of regulatory interfaces, were a lot of bottlenecks created by that, a lot of rent seeking along the value chain, bureaucratic delays that then just had add-on cost effects on different projects. So in streamlining the agencies, in privatizing the institutions, we then expect to see that it becomes easier for private sector to get collaborations with the government, because everybody is now thinking from a profit-oriented viewpoint, from an efficiency, cost efficiency viewpoint, from an impact viewpoint, and that handshake is then easier, in my view, between the government and the private sector. So this is also something that we hope, as the agencies are being streamlined, as that privatization process is happening, that it can be done in a very timely manner so that it doesn't constitute further delays for industry players and therefore impact negatively also on the decade of gas. So I think if I'll just wrap it up, to say that there is a very positive signal that the PIA presents, but there are also very cogent legacy challenges that must be addressed as we then begin to operationalize. So it's a huge opportunity landscape. How efficiently we then implement is where the difference is going to be. Stakeholder engagement is going to be a continuous requirement. It's not a perfect piece of legislation, so we have to keep refining. And the way this happens, that is a win-win for Nigeria as a people, as a government, is that the engagement continues to happen. We also have to look at the signals that we send out in this process of engagement, in the process of effecting the regulations and rolling out of the programs, because the entire world is watching, and the energy transition and the defunding of the sector is a gross reality for us, and we must be paying attention to the fact that the world is not waiting for Nigeria to get this act right. Now, at the beginning, and I'll just wrap up my initial comments on this. At the beginning, moderator, you made reference to the Ukraine war and what that impact has had on the global gas industry. So we now see a situation where the world is looking back into Africa to see how they can find alternative sources of gas. And Nigeria, if we had done a few things right, might have been able to mine that opportunity more profitably, more efficiently. But that's not the case because we are not prepared. In looking at the decade of gas, now enabled by the PIA, the legislative framework that is there, it's important for us to understand that there is a narrowing window within which we can get a few things right to make sure that we actually are able to attain those objectives and then tap into what is a very clear evolution in the way the global gas markets are going and what its implications are not just for Nigeria but for Africa. It's a huge opportunity, also a huge challenge, but we're in the process, but it's important we don't derail, especially given that this is an election year we're in, and for the next perhaps 12 to 18 months, we want to make sure that our eyes are not taken off the imperatives to deliver on the decade of gas objectives because we are lost in politicking, electioneering, the changing of institutions, leaders of those places, and policy continuity. Those are the kinds of things that can derail even whatever advantages we've gotten so far. And I'll anchor my comments there for this time. Thank you very much.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Mrs. Joy Zigbo. Really very insightful. Quite a lot of sound bites and takeaways from there. Key things that I picked up was definitely huge opportunities with PIA, huge challenges, time of the essence. You know, we may have missed the window as a result of the Ukraine Russia war, as the world looked to alternatives for which, if Nigeria was ready, would have been able to contribute. But I think also you sort of highlighted the importance of stakeholder engagement, a continuous dialogue, but having some clear timelines. You know, and what sort of crossed my mind as you spoke was, you know, it may be perhaps the time for the industry to sort of revisit and rearticulate a roadmap that is very clear on what the priorities are and how we can get ourselves back on track. Just the thoughts that I'd like to leave with us as I move to another perspective, and we will have you come back shortly. So I'd look to you now, Mr. Oyebanji, coming back to you. So we've experienced, and I mean, again, touching on what Mrs. Joy Zigbo talked about with regards to the impact of the war. We've experienced an increase in energy pricing globally in recent times. You know, people have speculated, and indeed the media have indicated that the Russian-Ukraine war has impacted the Nigerian downstream sector by extension. Is this the case?
Thank you very much, Anne.
Thank you.
It's good to be technology-proof, so my voice will not disappear in the course of my comments. Yes, there's no doubt, very clearly, and I don't think Nigeria in particular is unique in this situation. Unfortunately, because of our heritage and legacy situation, the prices of diesel has continued to go up, for instance, and everybody's clamoring and talking about intervention or what can be done, that kind of thing. And I'm sure for those of you who have been abroad or watch global media, the global media space, those concerns exist everywhere in the world, whether in the US or the UK or anywhere else. People are complaining about energy prices. So Nigeria isn't unique. The truth of the matter is that, and somebody asked me that question, what's the prognosis for diesel prices by the end of the year? And I said, look, if the exchange rate continues to, you know, go down the drain or depreciate, you know, if the war in Ukraine continues, then the likelihood is that, you know, prices may even go higher than they are presently. A good chunk of crude comes out of Russia. I believe it's either the second or third largest producer of crude in the world. So disruptions in that region have obviously affected supply of crude. That has driven up the price of crude, and by extension, the price of refined petroleum products has also gone up tremendously. The premiums charged on cargoes has also gone up. So at the end of the day, you have a double whammy of, a high exchange rate, high product costs in terms of the refined products. So that is why undoubtedly you continue to have that impact in Nigeria. Unfortunately, because of inadequate local refining capacity, it's not a case where we can ramp up supply short run. We have to struggle and get whatever we can get. And to compound the issues, because of where we stand in the PIA implementation, the NMPC remains the sole importer of PMS, and to a large extent, even diesel, because when they bring in diesel, probably because they're able to source Forex at a cheaper rate, it tends to come in cheaper. The end result of that is those who may want to import in larger scale, because they have to go to the autonomous market to source their own foreign exchange, the likelihood is that their price will be significantly higher than what the NMPC can bring in. So that reduces their desire to take a risk and bring in cargoes when, if NMPC also brings in a cargo around that time, it will be priced at a significantly lower price. So it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. We don't have enough, so the price is going up, which ordinarily will attract a lot of people to bring in more products so that the supply would increase and the price will be forced down. But that is not happening because NMPC intervenes and brings it in because of a lower Forex price at a cheaper rate. So it keeps on going around like that, and the end result is that every minute the price keeps on going up. For the players in the industry, it makes more economic sense to see how you can get the cheaper product from NMPC than sometimes taking a risk on a more expensive cargo. So no doubt, yes, your question was, has it impacted us locally? Definitely, there's no doubt about it. And as long as the war continues, it's likely that we'll continue to have this problem.
Right, thank you very much for that. I'm just going to try and see if we can get Mr. Olashukwu Agbaje back. I'd like to sort of focus the next question on him and give him the opportunity perhaps to finish his presentation. Can we have you back, sir? So just as you wrap up your presentation, I'd be grateful for you to sort of give your perspective on this question. A key aspect of the PIA, the oil subsidy, has been suspended for about 18 months. What is the likely impact on the economy vis-a-vis foreign exchange, debt levels, etc., from your perspective as a regulator? And I'll ask the same again from Mr. Obong shortly. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, so before I speak on the subsidy issue, the suspension of the PIA commission, a lot of issues that we just quickly need to touch on. Yes, the reality is that we have a situation, a global situation that impacts on the price of products such as diesel, and so in the past few weeks we've had issues around fuel scarcity in some locations, triggered basically by the fact that diesel got out of the reach of transporters basically as a result of the cost, and that affected product movements. And so government had to respond basically by ensuring that the freight rates provided for movement of products was reviewed, and that was done recently, and so hopefully that will restore optimal product movement into different parts of the country. And so those are some of the challenges we face. In terms of pricing, basically what we emphasize at NMPC, consultation, because these are the teething problems that we face, and we believe that these issues must be addressed very, very comprehensively. So a lot of engagements are going on. Teams are consulting various operators on aspects of gas pricing. I had mentioned it earlier. We believe in the willing buyer, willing seller, and ultimately we are headed towards
Okay, so we will give him a second. Right, I would move then across to Mr. Obang. I hope we can hear you. If we can't, then Mr. Oyebanji would have to do the honors. Mr. Obang, can we hear you? Right. So perhaps you can help us out with this. Given the inactivity of the state government-owned refineries, and including the upcoming Dangote refinery and a few others, what is your outlook on refining? Vis-a-vis capacity, availability for the coming years, and perhaps aligned to your previous answer.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, there's no doubt that increase in local refining capacity would be a very, very positive thing for us, for the country. Yes. And it is certainly something that is envisaged in the PIA as passed. Obviously, given the capital investment required for the establishment of refineries, whether they're big, small, or medium, there needs to be significant support for those who want to invest in that area in terms of fiscal policies, in terms of even the policy environment. I think the PIA, I think in section 317, subsection 8, if I'm not mistaken, talks about backward integration as a policy, and the whole idea is to drive investment in refining. In fact, government has also proposed the idea of taking an investment stake in any refinery that is above 50,000 barrels per day capacity. So definitely this is all, I think, from a positive perspective. However, it's not something that can happen overnight. We're all aware that the really big refinery, the Dangote refinery, construction has been ongoing now for, I think, maybe 4 years, and it's still not completed as at now. The investment requirement is huge, and definitely the environment, I think, has improved with the passage of PIA. We also have seen quite a few modular refineries. A lot of those modular refineries are concentrated on diesel rather than petrol. So I think we've done the right thing in improving the environment for refinery investment, but as you know, today there's no government refinery that is operational. All the refineries are virtually down. The only operational refineries are, those smaller, much smaller modular refineries. I mean, and when you look at the size of what is expected from the Dangote refinery, which I think is 600,000 barrels a day, and when you note that some of those modular refineries are talking about 10,000 barrels a day, 20,000 barrels a day, then you can see the huge difference in size and capacity. So we're very much far from where we need to be. The ideal thing, because of the proximity of crude oil in Nigeria, would be that we actually become the refining hub, not only for Nigeria in terms of meeting all our domestic requirements, but also becoming the refining hub for West Africa and maybe Southern Africa, such that rather than just selling crude, we will now be actually a net exporter of refined products from which we can earn even much more money than what we earn on crude. That's really the direction that we need to go, but it's still going to take a lot of work, to attract the kind of investment that is needed in this area.
Thank you very much. Just to remind us, have we got a few questions from the audience? Okay, please just note your questions. We'll come back to you. I'm going to try and zoom now to the virtual audience. I believe we have one question online. Can someone read this out to me? Okay, Doris, are you able to? Thank you.
As part of this PIA, is it impossible for the NBCC to compel government to ban generators? A move that will lead to more purposeful reforms in the power sector. Stabilize the petroleum industry, lead to redirecting the energy used for generators to tractors for agricultural development, which will improve food security as well.
A very bold question. I hope we heard and you're able to give a response to that. Thank you.
Well, I don't know.
Can the NBCC create a movement to ban generators?
I don't know under what platform that would be. I don't know whether maybe the question is about another NSAS movement on generators. But I understand the sentiment behind the question. And I think the whole idea is to try and create an environment which will encourage government to move in the direction of, again, improving the enabling environment. My own response would be that I don't think something as drastic as that needs to be done. What I think needs to be done is we already have an instrument, the PIA. We've all agreed that it's not a perfect document, but at least it's something for us to work on. What we need to do is to start to implement it. And obviously, there are going to be challenges in implementation, but through dialogue, through discussions that we continue to have, I think the authorities, government needs to understand that when they interact with the private sector, and private sector is suggesting things and talking about, the best way to go. I think you made a comment about a roadmap, agreeing on timeline and things like that. There needs to be the understanding that when you agree with the private sector on an approach to solve a problem, it doesn't mean necessarily, quote unquote, the private sector won a battle and you lost that battle.
Correct.
Sometimes there's that mindset, and therefore there's a tendency to say, the only reason private sector is talking about this is because they want all the advantages to themselves. And that really isn't the case. The whole idea is to create the environment which ends up being a win-win situation for both the government. Because if private sector thrives, investment comes in, government can collect more taxes, there's more employment, and so on and so forth. So I think the authority in particular, government by extension, need to listen more to the suggestions and advice of private sector, who in many cases have the exposure because they've invested in businesses, not only within this geography, but in various parts of the world. So they have the global experience, as it were, that they're able to bring to bear in terms of suggestions they're making. The other thing I should point out is that the PIA itself, a lot of people invested efforts and energy in it. Multilateral institutions, the private sector in Nigeria, the government itself, in terms of coming up, with this piece of legislation. And therefore, everybody is looking at the potential outcomes to see, has all that effort over the last 20 years been worth the while? So, having made all that effort, it would really be sad if at the end of the day, we are very tardy in implementation. We start leaving out significant bits and pieces that are supposed to engender confidence and bring in more investment into the country. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you very much. I mean, I think that was a robust response, sort of encapsulating the need for us to work together to get a win-win situation. Mrs. Joe Ezigbo, I don't know if you're still online. I'd sort of like to, I'm beginning to round off now, but I have a question here that I think may be of interest to you. There's been a persistent concern for host communities, the fact that the degradation of their environment and, and their habitats from gas flaring associated with oil drilling. The PIA penalizes companies for gas flaring, and the revenues from these penalties go towards the downstream infrastructure funds to be used for environmental remediation and relief for impacted host communities, whilst financing some of our downstream infrastructure investments, as you have described. Not necessarily focused on gas, but I would like your perspective with regards to this and other issues that you sort of highlighted as some of the challenges that we are working through under the PIA implementation. Have we made progress in those environs? Your perspective, ma'am.
Definitely, community engagement has been much higher levels than a lot of it around the private sector players themselves. But we are in a situation where we don't engage adequately. The lives of your people are at risk, your sectors are at risk, and so on and so forth. So it's difficult operating terrain. And one of the things I say is that a lot of the time you find that those of us who are operators in the field, we're paying the price for decades of mismanagement that we were in many cases not a part of. But that's not an excuse anyway. So generally speaking, the approach is community engagement, community remediation, capacity building, and so on and so forth. So looking at how you are a very good corporate citizen in that space. So also from a policy and regulatory point of view, and by the Act as well, we see that focus inwards back into the development of the communities. The efficiency around the deployment of the funds it is going to be a critical factor. So first and foremost, we want to make sure that the collection of the 0.5% is adequately done and accounted for. That accountability will continue to be key. We hope that in operationalizing, it will not become politicized. And this is because, as we know, there is involvement of the National Assembly in the process of determining, where the funds go and things like that. So these are some of the things that have the potential to stagnate the impact of that whole community remediation exercise. We've seen some of the things that happened even in the discussion around the community aspects of the bill. When we saw some fisticuffs at some point in time. But these are everyday feeding problems which we expect that everybody's putting the national perspective forward, keeping the bigger picture in view. We should be able to refine and move forward. The PIA is not a magic bullet, and everybody has alluded to this. So it's going to be a function of how well we decide to implement. People can see the cost of non-implementation, the cost of delays, and so on and so forth. I would want to quickly just segue into, I see a comment in the chat is related to gas. So if you don't mind, I can take it. It's actually a kind of a question.
Yes.
And he was asking, let me see, what do you see as the prospect for gas flaring and gas to power? So I've spoken a bit earlier around the fact that we saw the NGFCP, which has stalled significantly. There was a challenge around COVID, the logistics constraints around that. But we also know that there are issues around the available sites that are still open to be that whole process and what we can do with those flare volumes. So that's a project a program we want to still see some traction in, or for whatever it is what we want to see that successfully go to the end. But more importantly, I also mentioned the fact that even for any new developmental program, that there is the PIA, that's requirement for any producer to have clear gas commercialization plans even before their field development plans are approved. What this means is that if we can implement this and be consistent about it, then we hope to see less and less flaring as we're flaring down on existing projects, then we can also ensure that from the beginning we are addressing flare down even on new projects. Of course, the whole penalty regime within the PIA, penalty for flaring, has to be looked at in terms of the operationalization, and again looking at all the other metrics that surround the actualization of any new gas project, because sometimes it's almost easier to pay the penalty than to do the gas development project. And there's so many views of that which have alluded to. One of the key ones being commerciality, being security, being able to access even the components of the projects themselves. So I just want to talk about on that. And then in terms of gas to power, so this is a very tricky sector, and again, it's something that we have the solutions to, but being able to actualize them is another problem. The power space is a difficult space. It's important for us as a gas industry, because the power sector takes about 2/3 of our volumes. But the power sector is also this sector that is fraught with liquidity issues, where we're not able to address tariff issues, where we don't have adequacy of transmission and distribution, where there are gas supply constraints. And the gas supply constraints is easy to understand why that happens as well. We cited power plants without taking into cognizance the proximity to the source of gas. All right, a lot of the gas that we talk about in Nigeria is associated gas, gas that is produced because we are prospecting for oil, and that means that immediately it exposes us to the vagaries of oil, whether it's the vandalization of oil pipeline and infrastructure, or the pricing, everything that happens in the oil market, has an implication for associated gas. So one of the things that is actually a bit of a gap within the PIA, and there's still advocacy around being able to address this, is having the PIA now have very express fiscal terms that relate to non-associated gas exploration and production, which is very critical for Nigeria. That we need to bring more gas volumes to the fore that are not tied to our oil production activities, and that helps to balance out supply. That will also help to address some of the gas constraints issues in the gas to power space. So again, in the power space, no magic bullet, many things that need to happen. We are seeing a lot of work happening between the government agencies and the private sector players who are in the power space, trying to address some of the many commercial, infrastructure, structural gaps within that sector. Done on the commercial side of it to enable, a win-win for those who supply the gas that will now keep this power sector. And a lot of work is also being done to try to address the liquidity issues within the sector that impact on the production and supply side. I know that one of the constraints, and I'll wrap up with this, is also trying to address this issue of a long-standing conversation around the currency mismatch, where the power producers are investing in dollars and receiving revenues in naira, and collection and receiving of the full value is still a problem. Yeah. So as long as we have some of those gaps, we're going to be seeing challenges. But again, like I said, a lot of work is being done. We just need to be able to bite the bullets and take some very hard stances when it comes to few things that we know will enable the narrative to change in a significant manner and help us to achieve some of our power targets that will move the country out of this, very 5 gigawatts that we talk about all the time in a nation of over 200 people. All right, thanks, Anne.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Joy Zigbo. Very, very insightful. A lot of key points you've made there. really looking at how we need to address liquidity, the impacts on demand and supply, really working through the various stakeholders. I'm just going to come back to the audience. We're trying to get Mr. Shupo Agbaje to come online because there are a few questions for him. But while we're waiting for that, are there any questions from the audience? Please signify and introduce yourself very quickly. Okay, I've got 3 hands up. I'll take one from the council table. I'll take one from behind, and the third gentleman there. Thank you very much. Please start off, Mr. Riatelli. Or perhaps should we take you last, since you're in-house? We'll take you last, if that's okay, please. Thank you very much. Let's encourage our potential new members. Please rise, gentlemen, and introduce yourself as you put your questions forward. Sorry, 1 second. I'm going to get somebody to pass the microphone to you. Thank you. We've got a question online, so we're waiting for that to be resolved in a second. Okay, go on. Over to you.
My name is Olagoke Akeoshala. I'm a legal practitioner. My question to Mr. Oyebanji is regarding the comments he made, which I've actually read elsewhere on the news, about the federal government taking stake in new refineries being built. My question is, what's the logic in that, considering the fact that the problem we're having today is due to the fact that the refineries owned by the government or the NNPC are not working, they're not functional, they've never been functional for the last 40 years. Why should the government decide to take stake in the new, basically the solution to our problem? Would that not compound our problems going forward? Thank you very much.
Thank you. We will take all the questions and we'll ask it. But you must have peeped into my questions here, because it's one of those that we're waiting to ask the regulators. Okay, gentlemen.
Right, good morning. Thank you very much. Mrs. Renu, Mr. Oyebanji, fantastic conversations so far. Introduction.
Sorry, what's your name? Introduce
my name is Shea
yourself.
Bava. I'm an engineer, chemical engineer. So I guess the implementation and the execution of the PIA over the next few years, or this timeline that we're hoping to see, are there any sort of initiatives or programs that that the public sector can tap into, that will actually support and improve the efficiency of the federal refineries? So anything that you can suggest that public sector businesses can get involved in to support the operations and the efficiency of refineries? Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. So we've got 2 questions there. One that really speaks to the state-owned energy, NNPC, acquiring stakes in 6 private refineries in Nigeria, and the second one around initiatives and programs public sector and businesses can tap into to get involved. I'll take Mr. Riatelli's third question. And Mrs. Joey Zigo, please be on standby to support once Mr. Oyebanji has helped us.
Okay, as I listened to the various comments and presentations, something kept recurring, and that is interference. And it got me concerned. And I wanted to ask this question. Most likely, the regulator on this program will answer that. And that is, who has the legal authority to suspend aspects of the PIA? Is there a phased implementation of the PIA that requires the regulator to determine what to implement and what to suspend? This is very disturbing, and I would like it clarified. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Very $1 million question, but I'm sure the panelists will do their best. I'll kick off first with Mr. Oyebanji. In response, I'll get Mrs. Joey Zigo, and I hope by then we've got connectivity for Mr. Agbaje so that he can support. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for those very incisive questions. I'll start with my thoughts on the last one. I tell you, this is something that we in the industry have debated a lot, because a law has been passed, and therefore, ideally, if there's going to be any amendment or change or whatever. Basically, ideally, it should come back to the legislature to be the ones to handle that. But what we have seen is a pronouncement. So I think legal minds would probably be in a better position really to say whether that is the case. But I know in some quarters, some people have actually felt that this is something that needs to be resolved and resolved very fast. I'll give you just one example. The PIA has technically scrapped the idea of PEF, the Petroleum Equalization Fund, okay? But the authority continues to operate as if PEF is going to be there forever. Now, how does that affect operators? It affects operators because every day as we speak, transactions are going on, trucks are moving product across the country, liabilities are being accumulated, which will grow very large in a very short amount of time. That is even compounded further now by the fact that, like Mr. Shukwa talked about, government has increased the freight rate for moving petroleum products. So what that means is that the liabilities that are going to be accrued under PIF are even going to increase even more. I had a study in my office last week, and it gave the indication that just for what we have, we will do in this month, we'll probably have an increased liability of about 100 million naira. Now, the issue is you are doing that. Meanwhile, the law that establishes PEF has been scrapped. It has now been taken over by PIA, and that doesn't have any allowance for PEF. So what happens tomorrow if that liability gradually grows, becomes 5 billion, and then somewhere along the line, there's a change. We now want to implement the PIA fully. Somebody will now tell you, well, sorry, those liabilities, you can't get them back because the law, PF doesn't exist anymore under the law. So those are the kind of things that need to be resolved very quickly, because if not, it is definitely going to bring uncertainty, into the minds of investors as to what the future holds. You talked about what kind of initiatives as regards refineries, public sector or private sector can come to bear. Well, definitely, first and foremost, PIA has envisaged, like I said, does encourage investment in refining. Therefore, there's at least the environment in terms of the legal framework is there now. But things that can be done in the interim, people have looked at things like co-location. For instance, I know that in Port Harcourt, there's a group that is trying to put that is very close to the Port Harcourt refinery so that they will be able to take advantage of existing infrastructure in that immediate neighborhood. But again, refining investment in fossil fuels globally is currently challenged simply because international financiers are reluctant due to green energy activists and so on and so forth. So actually the funds and investment money available for this kind of investments is becoming tighter by the day. And that's, I think, even a greater challenge. So for me, the modular refineries continue to present themselves as a relatively good opportunity. I have my own personal doubts because with refining, in most cases, bigger is better. The bigger your refinery, the bigger your throughput, then the more efficient you can be compared to these very small modular refineries, which can be, one Dangote refinery can represent 50 small refineries. So I think for the country, it makes better sense when we have 3 Dangote refineries than 300 small, tiny refineries all over the place. Then the last question was on government taking stake in refineries. Now, I think one of the things that we need to sometimes, again, sit back or step back from is and maybe the fact that on the 1st of July, NNPC will become a commercial entity fully and become NNPC Limited may help to try and change our mindset a bit. When we think of government, we are thinking of the Ministry of Petroleum and things like that. And really, NNPC Limited is going to be seen as a major crude producer. And if you are a major crude producer, then you definitely want to take stakes in refineries. In some cases, you own refineries to guarantee a market or outlet for your crude. So because you are an investment partner with refineries, you know that whenever you produce crude, there are refineries that are going to take up stock. I would be more worried if government said we are going to take controlling interest in all those refineries. As long as the interest is a minority interest, I see it purely as a commercial decision on part of NNPC. I think the existing government refineries, if long ago government had divested of its majority stake and maybe took only a small percentage, and the model we can all point to very easily is the NLNG model, where government is just a stakeholder along with other major players, and that has yielded much better results than a situation where government is the full owner of the refinery or has majority stake, and therefore every decision then becomes a political decision, which is the main reason why the refineries are not working in the first place. So for me, I don't have any big problems, with a 20% stake. It guarantees an outlet for the crude, but we just hope that the Nigerian element will not creep in through that particular avenue. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Mrs. Joe Ezigbo, are you able to add to what has been said? So just give us a second. We're trying to get your volume. Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes. We can hear you now. We can hear you. I hope you can hear us.
I wanted to confirm in the hall if you can hear me now. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So I said ordinarily I would, except I must exit now. Unfortunately, I have another panel I'm on that has been moved up slightly. I guess maybe somebody hasn't shown up, and they've just been informed I need to come online now. I've made my apologies to Mrs. Aziz, and I want to also make the apologies to yourselves and everyone in the hall. Please forgive me, but if there's any subsequent question, I will be very happy to articulate my responses and share with NBCC to communicate with whoever is asking. Please forgive me, this was not the plan. It was supposed to be one event after the other. But I do have to exit now if you don't mind.
Absolutely fine. Thank you very much for your time. We're just going to move on to... Thank you very much for participating, Mrs. Joe Ezigbo. I had a personal question to ask you on the Lions Den, but that will be for another day. But thanks for your participation. So I'm just going to move on now to Mr. Olashupo Agbaje. Are you available to share your thoughts on the last question as we round off, and also to respond to one question we've just received online? Good.
So sorry, the network has not been very friendly. I just hope within the next few minutes there will be no interruption so that we can run through some of the various issues that have been raised. In terms of pricing, that said it, a lot of consultations are ongoing on gas pricing, and our objectives are very clear. And in terms of our regulation, stakeholder engagement, clear dates for the engagement will be revealed, will be made known very soon, of course, in the month of July, so that we can engage with operators at this giving stage. Engagement. That's just the keyword, very key. On gas, on issues around gas, we understand the decade of gas is priority to NMPPRA, is priority to government, supply, storage, production, distribution, and a lot of work is going on in this aspect also in terms of developing a clear framework for the decade of gas program. The NMPPRA is fully in this, and we're committed to the fact that the decade of gas must be a success. And so one of the key instruments that are available for infrastructure development to ensure that this actualizes the MPGIF. Care is being taken to ensure that the MPGIF takes off in the most efficient manner. That's ongoing, and we believe that the MPGIF intervention will ensure that a lot of infrastructure is brought into the gas space in Nigeria. On gas flares, basically we all understand that gas must be commercialized, must be monetized. That is the whole objective of the government programs around gas. And we believe that more of this will do, more of LPG penetration and others will achieve. Gas flare will consistently reduce. PIA continuity and consistency. Yes, we all understand that we have a steering committee, presidential steering committee in place, whose responsibility it is to ensure that there is continuity, to ensure that there is consistency, and the circle is working closely with the regulatory bodies that are on ground and also with the stakeholders in the industry. So continuity and consistency is key. After waiting 20 years, no one wants anything to go on around it. And so care is taken to ensure that we don't derail key objectives. On tax incentive.
Okay, I believe, may have lost Mr. Agbaje in his response, but we were actually coming to the end of the discussions. I'm just going to wrap up. We've spent nearly 2 hours. It's been very interesting, very insightful. A diverse range of questions that have come forward today, and very encouraging to see any other sort of comments or questions that come through. We would encourage by posting on the NBCC website with the required answers. I'm just going to summarize the conversation today in a few words, and borrowing the words from Mrs. Joy Zigbo. The PIA is not a magic bullet. I think it's important that we all go away with that. We need to bite the bullet to change the narrative in the energy power sector. The federal government has a critical stake to ensure the engagement continues. We need critical collaboration, but time is now of the essence. And there's been a few delays in implementation, but we recognize that all hands are on deck, and there is a meaningful plan to see through the PIA implementation. On that note, I want to say a very big thank you to our panelists. They've all done an excellent job. I know that the formal vote of thanks will take place, but I want to thank you all for your time and your commitments. It's been, you've been able to sort of respond in a masterly way, particularly Mr. Oyebanji, who's been put on the spot a few times this morning. In fact, I wanted to ask you a question, Mr. Oyebanji, and you have to permit my ignorance. I knew that Mobile had announced its exits and divestments a few years ago, but 11 PLC was a very interesting name. Do we know where that has come from?
Well, you have to ask the core investor where that name came from.
Okay. Thank you very much. I think I'm going to price that out of you after today's conversation. Yeah, and on that note, I want to say thank you as we now receive the sponsored ad by Shell?
Shell Nigeria Gas is committed to supporting Nigeria's industrialization through domestic gas distribution to manufacturing plants and industrial users. A larger portion of industries, smaller businesses, and homes continue to rely on generators for electricity. At SNG, we provide our customers with clean, reliable energy as a lower-cost alternative to liquid fuel. By providing this energy, we assist in building a stronger Nigerian economy. Incorporated in 1998, SNG is the first and only wholly owned gas distribution subsidiary of an international oil company in Nigeria. The company is certified ISO 14001, a certification that reflects that its operation is at the highest of industry standards. It's a growing world-class gas transmission and distribution network of over 138 kilometers. It operates several distribution systems, including Agbarauta in Ogun State, the Aba cluster in Abia State, and the Port Harcourt cluster in Rivers State. The company is in a growth phase and recently signed agreements to build infrastructure and deliver natural gas to customers in Lagos, Oyo, and Bayelsa states. Our customers cut across several sectors of the Nigerian economy, from pharmaceuticals, fast-moving consumer goods, glass, ceramics, steel, to plastics and power. Currently, over 120 industrial customers are already connected to our gas supply network. In Abia State, SNG has completed a 20-kilometer gas pipeline project connecting to the industrial hubs in the state. These include Ogwo Hill, Osisioma, and Ariaria industrial zones. The 20-kilometer pipeline has enabled the supply of gas to major industrial customers, including the Ariaria Market Energy Solutions Limited, AMES. AMES is an independent power project, IPP, consortium that provides electricity to the popular Ariaria International Market, the largest leather shoemaking and open stall markets in West Africa. Ariaria Market has over 37,000 shops and an estimated 1 million traders. Rapidly expanding its operations in Nigeria, Shell Nigeria Gas signed a 20-year agreement with the Nigerian Gas Marketing Corporation for the domestic distribution of gas to industrial customers and manufacturing plants in Lagos and Ogun states. In the new deal, SNG will also extend its distribution network to Badagry to serve a new market in the border community. Our operations directly impact the local population through our direct social investments in education, road safety, and community health. The value chain we sustain improves internally generated revenues and creates thousands of jobs for Nigerians.
Right. On that note, on behalf of the patrons, the past president, and members of council, I'd like to thank you all for this session. As I hand over to Mr. Akin Oshutoki, he will give us the vote of thanks and announcements. Welcome, Mr. Oshutoki.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much, Ms. Renu. This has been the NBCC Energy Group event. The theme, Nigeria's downstream oil and gas industry navigating post-PIA realities. Without a doubt, our speakers and the moderator have done a fantastic job. And I think we should just put our hands together in appreciation of what they've done. Now, please allow me to say a big thank you on behalf of the Chamber to our speakers, Mr. Farouk Ahmed, Mr. Ed Ubong, Mrs. Audrey Jo Ezigbo, Mr. Adetunji Oyebanji, and our moderator, Ms. Anne Reno. Another round of applause, please. We acknowledge the presence of our patrons and council members, those in this hall and online. We thank them for being part of this event. Of course, we must not forget our sponsors, Shell Nigeria Gas Limited. Please, another round of applause. That is very important so that they can sponsor again. Ladies and gentlemen, the Energy Group and the MBCC headquarters, we thank you for the great job that you have done. So ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being here. We thank the Energy Group and the MBCC headquarters staff for a great job. Thank you very much. Let me use this opportunity to announce upcoming events. For those who are familiar with MBCC, we have events like this from time to time. In fact, every month we have a number of events that we put together for the benefit of our members and the public. We have the MBCC Programming Academy, opening ceremony and kickoff that is scheduled for July 4, 2022. It is scheduled for July 4, 2022. Please note this on your calendar. We also have the membership induction for July 14th to 2022. MBCC Abuja Members Evening will come up on Friday, July 22nd as well. The MBCC MSME Business Optimization Clinic is scheduled for Tuesday, July 26th. Please endeavor to participate in these programs. Make your events worthwhile by using this facility. Feel very free to walk around and appreciate what we've put together there. Here, we'll be very glad to give you very competitive rates. We'll like you to please use this facility for your future events. If you are interested in becoming a member of this chamber, please visit our website www.mbcc.org.ng or meet any of our membership team in this hall. Also, please follow us on social media. The details will be shown on the screen. Once again, I'd like to say a very big thank you on behalf of the President, BC DME, who is not here, represented by DP Ray Ateli. I'd like to thank you for being part of this event, and we look forward to seeing you at our future events. Once again, I say thank you and have a very good morning. It's customary that we make presentations to our speakers. I like to do that and have a photo opportunity thereafter. Please, for those in the hall, after now, feel very free to enjoy our tea and coffee. They have been provided for you. Now, I have the honor in calling on Mr. Tunji Oyebanji, my brother and friend. Put your hands together, please. I'll ask Mr. Ray Ateli, DP Ray Ateli, to please do us the honor of presenting our gift to Mr. Tunji Oyebanji. Smile for the camera, please. Mr. Oyebanji is a friend of the chamber, has been to our programs before now. Okay. Please, that will be done. That will be done, please. Please. He's also a member of the chamber. Please put your hands together for Mr. Oyebanji. Please let me call on Miss Anne Reno. She's done a great job. Why don't you just put your hands together for her? She's done a great job.
I'm actually surprised because I'm a member of the chamber.
It doesn't matter. It's something to show that you are part of this event. Also, I'd like to say a big thank you to our speakers who were with us online. We will arrange to send to them their own gifts for being here, for being part of this event. Once again, I say a very big thank you for being here this morning. Thank you, and God bless you. Thank you. We will have a photograph opportunity. Please let council members, DP Reatelli, and the speakers first. We'll have with the speakers first, then we'll have with other council members.
In the middle, sir.
Okay, can we have another picture with just the DP and the speakers? Thank you.